Welcome to the passion of entrepreneurship. And today we are going to be profiling an amazing musician and entrepreneur, Dave Carroll. And just to let you know, every weekday in June, I'm going to be bringing you an incredible entrepreneur, business owner to share their journey, what it is that's fueled them and how they find their way through the challenges of this whole crazy life of owning your own business. So welcome, Dave. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks, Ravi. It's always a pleasure to chew the fat with you.
So, it's interesting because your journey as an entrepreneur, a lot of people, when they think of entrepreneurs, they don't necessarily think of musicians when it's not what comes to mind. But that was how yours started, was it? Or did you have a start even before then in terms of trying to create a business?
I had a couple of things before that. So my roommate and I in university, I had already started playing guitar, and I might have had a gig or two, but we started a maid service called Mayday Maid Service. And we thought,
really?
Yep. And when you need help, call Mayday. That was our logo. And we thought that women would love having a couple of young guys come clean their house so they could tell all of their friends. We have 2 male maids coming in, every week. And that all that happened, except we found that the ladies also wanted, they were very picky about the quality of the work, and we weren't good cleaners. We didn't. We switched to window cleaning and painting and things like that, where people were afraid of ladders, and that was better for us.
So technical detail, you actually have to be good at what you're selling.
Yeah.
Okay. So what was it that made you say, okay, I'm going to go put out we're going to go put out our shingle? And because that's a lot of people would just go looking for a job.
Yeah, and I'd done that. At that point, I'd worked in the mine in Timmins, Ontario in the summer. My dad worked there, so I got a good paying job at the time, which, maybe minimum wage was $6 and I was getting 14. So it was good money. But there were aspects of certain summers there that I hated that job, where it was chemicals in the air and you're wearing earplugs and you're not talking to anybody, and you'd hate every minute of the day at the job, or depending on the job, I guess. And I think most entrepreneurs don't mind putting in extra hours if you like what you do, but it's painful for people that are inclined to do that, to have to spend time doing something they really don't want to do and feel they could be making a bigger impact or having more fun or doing something better somewhere else.
So when you started Mayday, was it just that feeling of, well, number one, control, that I'm doing this because I want to, but also that it was more interesting, competence aside, than what you were doing with your job previous?
Well, the idea for me was that I was in control of my own destiny in a way. I knew that if I canvassed a neighborhood and put a door hanger on people's place that said, "Call me in, we'll talk business," whatever, that there was some sort of correlation to that. If I spent this many hours here, I would get this many calls. And we were getting paid $15 an hour each. That's what we set the rate at. And there's something empowering about saying, okay, well, I don't mind. I have nothing against people who work for somebody else, but the person who's hiring them is shaving off the difference between what they're paying them and what they're keeping.
Right.
And the entrepreneurs, I think, are saying, I don't know what's going to happen here, but I like the potential. And if I work hard enough, why should I give up any of that to somebody else?
So what is it do you think that fueled that for you as you grew up, to say, yeah, I want to be able to have that amount of control? Because there's also a lot of risk that comes with this, that a lot of people are averse to when you think about stepping out on your
own. So my parents are both I came from a blue collar town. My dad was a miner and then an electrician at the mine. And we had periods in our life where he was unemployed, and it wasn't for lack of work ethic and for lack of interest in working. He was a very proud guy, and he worked hard for everybody he worked for. But you're not always in control of that, and the economy changes, or somebody's more outgoing in your workplace, and they stand out more. So when tough times come, maybe you get pushed aside. And I like the idea. To me, I have more faith in myself than I do in somebody who's hired me. That yes. I know what I'm capable of, and I know how far I can dig and how far I'm willing to go to see that my family's needs are met, or just an idea succeeds. And so if I'm passionate about something, I figure I will outwork most of the people in my space to get to where I need to go. And that's what entrepreneurs are fueled by, I think, is a belief in themselves, number one. And people that often, I think, go and work for somebody else when they might have had an inkling of a great idea, and everybody has a great idea. Those people maybe don't believe in themselves to the extent that they should. So entrepreneurs that are successful, their superpower might be simply that they believe in themselves and have faith in a good idea, and will see it through and make mistakes along the way.
Well, also, you saw what happened when you said your dad had a strong work ethic, and yet there were times that it just didn't work for him. Yeah. So you saw what the lack of security perhaps in that, because a lot of people think it's secure, but it's not necessarily.
You're absolutely right. As somebody who hasn't worked for anybody other than myself for 30 years or more, I guess, it occurred to me, I had the moment where I woke up one day, probably 15 years ago, after being in business for 15 years. And it occurred to me that I had no work on the horizon 3 months from now. And if I got sick or something happened, I would have nothing. And it was a sort of a sobering moment. But then I realized I meet people every day that thought they had a secure job, 20 years on the job, and then they're let go and they have no other skills, no drive, no belief in themselves that they could do something with themselves. So it's having faith in yourself. It's so important.
Yes. And so and also what you said is you finding something you're passionate about.
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry. No. And you.
I was going to say, passion it's got to be the key thing, because as an entrepreneur, you're going to have awful times where nobody wants what you're selling, or you don't have the money for it, and you got to find some money and you got to sell somebody on the idea. And rejection is part of the business, and you have to be so engaged by it, so hyped up by your idea that people can't stand to not want a piece of it. Right? You have to be your biggest cheerleader, and not just say the words. You have to be like living and breathing it. And human beings are that way. When we see somebody that's super excited about something, if a crowd is drawn to anything, we tend to want to go to see what they're looking at. And the first person there has to be the one who's got the most to lose or gain. That's the entrepreneur. Right.
So how did the journey go from when you had the painting and working outside on the homes business into music, to say, no, I am going to step into being a musician full time, because it's such a reliable career?
Yeah, right. Yeah, I say that my high school guidance teacher, I said, I want to be a brain surgeon. He said, there's no future in that. Go to be a musician, right? But it wasn't, I always wanted to be a musician from the time that I started playing the guitar in university. So okay. I taught myself before the internet, and that's a good and bad thing, because I picked up a lot of bad habits that I still have today. But I was passionate enough about it that I kept plugging away. And like all musicians, until you build a following, even when you have a following, it's a tough career. But when we first got started, my brother and I were playing in packed bars for 3 nights, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and we'd split $450 for 3 nights. Right. And so I had to find something else. So I switched to window cleaning and painting, and I would do that work in the mornings until around, after lunch, 1 or 2. Yeah. And then I would go and do gigs at night. And it was a way of financing my music career. But you find that with artists, with musicians, with actors, that they're doing that, right? The day job that allows them to do the passion. Yeah. And it's not definitely in the arts, for sure. Everyone's doing waiter jobs. You do anything you have to fuel what you love to do. But entrepreneurs with great ideas. I was reading the Elon Musk book, and when they didn't have anything going on in his early days, he was sleeping in his office, and they were talking about how everybody hadn't had a shower in days and that sort of thing. And here he's one of the more wealthy people in the world, but it was from that commitment and belief in himself, and a sort of a steadfast vision that we're on the right direction. It's just going to take some time, and we're going to sacrifice whatever we have to do to get there. Right. So when did you actually make the transition that you could live as a musician? Well, one of the things I learned is you have to live within your means. And
Mm-hmm.
so we took a very small weekly paycheck and put as much through as a write-off as we were allowed to do. And yeah, like just always frugal. And, and for me, the thing was don't live outside your means to the point that you have to get a day job, because the pattern I found was there were these really good musicians who said, I'm just going to get a day job to help myself out. And then they got a full-time job and they started spending more money, and then they couldn't afford to do gigs. And then they get a family and it just doesn't work. So for me, it was don't do anything that's going to force you to get a day job, and stay focused on what you're doing. Find better gigs. If you're playing in pubs, in my case, we were playing a lot of bars. I never saw myself as a bar guy. We did our very best and we had a great following in the bars, but that was never my destination. I was just going to be there until I found something else. And I just had faith that something else would come along. And eventually the best thing that ever happened in my career, we had already established ourselves as legitimate full-time musicians. But the best thing that happened in my career was United Breaks Guitars, which is way outside the traditional music stream. And no one could have predicted that sort of a thing called YouTube, where you put your music up for free, it leads to a speaking career and other things that you can become a songwriter for companies. All those things were from a result of just trying something because I had the time to do it, right? Because I was a full-time musician.
Right. But even there, you had built a significant amount of success, that you were touring, you were traveling to the States to do a gig there, right?
Yeah.
So you had built enough of a business that you weren't just a local, playing in local areas. You were getting well known in certain areas, and you were traveling all over the place for your work.
Right.
So
yeah.
So the thing that comes to mind there is when you're doing all of that traveling, and that's something that you're loving and such, and I really appreciate what you say about living in the means. How do you balance that with a life when you've got that? Because you know, it's wonderful to love what you're doing, but to actually have a life when you're on the road that much.
So you've probably seen Schindler's List.
Mm-hmm.
And there's the scene where his wife comes in fairly early in the movie, and she's clearly not part of the program. And then it cuts to him waving goodbye to her on the train. We never see her again, right? Because she wasn't part of the plan, or she didn't integrate into his life. And I had relationships. I remember I had a girlfriend who asked when I was going to get a real job, and it didn't last much longer than that. Beautiful girl, very nice person. We got along great in a lot of ways, but she didn't understand that what I was doing was, I was passionate about it, and that was my life, and that I had to let that go. Yeah. And I've enjoyed. We had to take a lot of bad gigs to get the good ones, and to this day I appreciate a good gig when I get it. But I've played the bars where there's 6 people at a bar in the days when you could smoke. The 6 people were just smoking and watching me. I'd finish the song, they wouldn't applaud. They just see it crumble, like from each song to each song. And I would sing to the bartender and one guy named Matt Lewis who would come in, and those were my people because they listened. And so you find your wins where you can find them.
Right. And I mean, that's the thing, to get through it. I think part of what keeps people from this path sometimes is you have to go through so much of what people would call failure to get those wins that are the ones that fuel you.
Yeah. A lot of people, I think, are, and some people have more to consider. If I said, if I had never played a gig in my life, but I said to my wife, Jill, I want to be a musician and go on the road. Now that I've got 2 kids and no experience, that's a harder sell. So I understand that some people, they might have to mortgage their house. So you better be sure that you not just have a good idea, but you have a solid plan. And sometimes entrepreneurs, I think, are a little scattered, some of them, or they love the idea more than the plan.
Yeah.
The really successful entrepreneurs consider all the angles, or at least seek advice from people who can show you the pitfalls of what your plan might be instead of just jumping in.
Okay. And I want to come back to that. But right now, you said something about, you had a sense something was going to happen different than just playing the bars. And, you definitely could not have predicted the United Breaks Guitars piece. So for those who may not be familiar, if you can just share basically what happened there. You were on the way to a gig, right?
Yeah. So Don and I, my brother Don and I, played in a band called Sons of Maxwell for 20 years, and we went to a showcase, and we were invited to go to Nebraska to play to a bunch of places there. And we got on a flight with United Airlines to go through Chicago, and it turned out that my guitar was really badly damaged en route. And somebody saw baggage handlers in Chicago mishandling instruments, which I assume were ours, because I think we were the only musicians on the plane. And it turned into an ongoing pursuit for United to try and take some responsibility for the broken guitar. And when they didn't do it, and they shut the conversation down, I said I had other tools at my disposal to try and get them to take responsibility. And I wrote 3 songs and made 3 music videos from 3 different perspectives to make it interesting. And the first of the 3 videos, called United Breaks Guitars, is the workhorse of the 3, and it's got 20 million views now. And it was a new time in social media. And so social media and virality was a new word. And my video went viral at a time when 1 million hits was a big thing. And it turned into other people around the world saying this is an inspirational story, or for whatever reason, I was asked to start telling my story, and I became a speaker almost literally overnight. And I've done that now for 10 years.
And let's be clear, your budget on that video was?
Yeah, the budget was $150. The value was higher than that because the professionals I brought in, friends that donated their time, brought in a better product. But it looks like I didn't have much money on my side of the camera, but there was a good camera and a good Steve Richard and Lara Cassidy director. And yeah, so it was a real good coming together moment. And it shows that today I've always believed it's the content, the cream rises to the top. It's not how much money you have necessarily. If you have something that resonates with people, it will spread.
Right.
So, yeah.
So you are continuing to play with Sons of Maxwell, and you're speaking.
Yep. And yeah, I've never thought I have to be one or the other. And it's been confusing for some people because we tend to pigeonhole people. We have less time to focus on any one thing these days. So if you see me on a music video, then I must be a musician. But if you see me on a stage as a speaker, then I must be a speaker. And I brought music into my speaking, and I bring the speaking. I do longer intros on my concerts than I would have before. And I find I'm a communicator, and a storyteller. And I can do that just like, I guess, nicotine is, you administer it with a chew tobacco or with a cigarette. It depends on the delivery device. So I'm a songwriter, or I'm a writer, or I'm a speaker, but it's really, I'm trying to communicate ideas that impact people and make them feel something.
So you were able to connect your passion with that journey. But
Yeah.
also, when you started as a speaker, we've chatted about how you really didn't know what was involved, and you had to learn very quickly, right? Your first gig.
Yeah, super. Like, I knew nothing about the speaking world. I knew that I'd been on stage a lot, so I wasn't intimidated by crowds, and I knew I could project myself in a way that was comfortable to me and authentic to who I was. I'm not flamboyant on stage, but I'm confident when I know the words to my songs and everything. Mm-hmm. And I thought, I'll break my speech down. It was a 40-minute. I'll break it down into 8 5-minute segments, and I could probably get through that. And I did have some cue cards that I relied on from time to time, but I think I was comfortable. But I got the first person that I met at that event was he was the person who hired me. And he realized very quickly that I hadn't ever spoken before in front of an audience. And that was the first time he knew that. And he walked me through and gave me some tips right there and said, okay, well, this is the most powerful position on the stage. You have you'll have points in your presentation that will be more powerful than others. Don't give those points while you're moving. Wait till you get to the most powerful position on the stage, then deliver the point. And plant your feet. And those are, I still use that advice. It's sage advice.
Yeah, and in some ways, it's almost like learning another instrument to convey your message, isn't it?
Yeah.
In terms of your movement. If
you think that being a musician means you are a good speaker, or vice versa, it's not true. They're 2 different skills. And you, as a speaker, you have sometimes an hour to give your message, and as a songwriter, maybe it's just the intro and 4 minutes of music. So you have to learn how to pace yourself. Yeah. And bring people. You can't have, Robin Williams was like a master comedian. if you watched him for a long time, I used to get tired of watching because he's so on all the time, right? And because he was a master, he could pull that off, but most people couldn't. And you can't have music that's just full blast the whole time. You got to have some dips and valleys, and a good speaker does that too.
Right.
Dynamics, right?
Absolutely. And the thing, though, that I hear from that contributed to your success is that you admitted that you were a learner in this stage, and you were willing to learn and take that input rather than I'm the expert, I had this happen.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of been my style. And I think that I got early feedback from people that said it was different than any speaker they'd ever seen, and it was because I hadn't had the training from professional speakers to tell me how it has to be. I think authenticity was just coming into the lexicon of people that they want from speakers at the time, instead of having a perfectly sculpted look and everything timed just right.
Yes.
I went to, and I stood on stage and I presented myself as a guy, like you just said. I never said I knew all the answers. I'm just going to tell you my story, and hopefully what I'm going to tell you will resonate with you in a way that will maybe inspire you to say, I can do that too, or I've never thought of it that way before. But
right.
Yeah.
So how have you found, now you've been in this business for 10 years and you've got a long career as a musician. How have you found that the way that you approach your business has evolved in this time? What really has shifted for you in terms of how you do all the basic little building blocks of the business, the marketing, everything like that?
I'm still learning as I go along, and the times are changing so fast that I think what someone might have done 3 years ago is now all out the window, because the speakers market has it's been turned up on its head, and how we market ourselves and present ourselves as digital presenters is a whole other skill that we all have to learn now.
Yeah. From 3 months ago, it's a totally different world, right?
But again, if you think the way I do, that I'm a communicator, so I can do it with music, I can do it with a song, or I can write it out, or I can say it digitally, I guess. I will have to learn how to become better at that, but I'm not learning a brand new skill. I'm just tweaking the way I deliver the skills that I've got. And that I find that empowering and calming. And I think going forward, we all have the ability to roll with the times, but you just have to be flexible. And again, it comes down to faith in yourself. And the one thing I've learned after 30 years is I've never gone without a meal, and hopefully, that'll stay. And I've had amazing serendipitous things where, I'm 30 grand in debt because we recorded a record and we have 0 gigs on the horizon. Well, what are we going to do? And I got a call from an ex-corporate client in Germany who says, would you like to come and speak? We'll pay you $30,000, exactly what we needed to get flush. And it happened at the time where we had no gigs on the calendar and we needed work. And that sort of thing just happens all the time. So I'm a big believer that if you are passionate about what you're doing, there's something magical that goes on. It's not just stick with it and it'll happen because you're there enough. There are things at play where the right person comes along at the right time because of the way you present yourself. Maybe it's a little imperceptible body language things that make you more attractive, put you top of mind to somebody else. But there's something to be said about doing what you love and sharing.
Yeah. But the key there is the sharing and the serving, and you're not focused on the getting. You're trusting in a way that it's going to come to you.
100%.
Okay.
I like the saying, I forget who said it first, but the idea that the purpose of every business is to be of service. Mm-hmm. If you're in business, you should be, instead of what can I get from this client, it's how can I serve? And it sounds like you could use language that would make it hard for the person to understand what perspective you're coming from, but there is a difference.
Yes.
And they will feel it. They will know the difference between the person who says, I want to help you and I'm going to charge you for it, and the person who says, you're just another paycheck for me and I'll do what I said I would do.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, the thing I find also fascinating is, you've been successful, you are successful, and yet you're willing to and open to learning more. You've actually gotten involved in a program to grow your skills in this.
Yeah. So I'm a member of ELP, and which is the Entrepreneurial Leadership Program through the Wallace McCain Institute, which is also known as WMI, and that is under the University of New Brunswick umbrella. So UNB sort of houses the organization of WMI, but as a member, they bring in classes each year. So I'm in ELP 12F, meaning Friday. I have a group that meets Friday and Saturday, one weekend a month. And they're at the 13th year now. So there will be a time in the coming years where there will be 1,000 businesses represented. And it'll be a network of entrepreneurs who come together to share best practices, to support each other, and just plug in with. And the purpose of the organization isn't just to help your business, but for you to join a group of people so you can help them and you get the help back.
Right. Masterminding, basically.
Right. With a wider organization than just the group that you have. So I'm close to my group of, there's 16 people in my group. I'm close to them, but I have solid familiar relationships with people and other groups just because we have that in common and we understand how things go. So there's confidentiality is one of the biggest ideas. You can share anything with anybody in what we call in forum, and it's understood that you don't talk about it with anybody else. And that gives you that group may be that one place that you can't, where you can say things that you might not even want to say to your spouse for whatever reason.
Right. So can you share one or two of the insights you've had in being able to be part of that's impacted how you run your business?
Yeah, well, so this is an example of why I wish I would have had ELP sooner, but for up until about 3 or 4 months ago, I had spent a fair bit of time over the previous 2 years trying to get a DNA company off the ground. And through my work with United Brace Guitars, I found my way into an opportunity where I could have started a company that had the exclusive rights to sell to RCMP and the military and law enforcement across the board, a DNA device that could identify people in under 90 minutes and get their full DNA profile, to test rape kits, to get fingerprints, blood samples, that sort of thing, buccal swabs, identify people with certainty. And if I had had ELP experience sooner, I would have made better business decisions, but I was going into an area of business that I didn't really have the experience in. And I made some fundamental bad decisions on my own. And then there were things outside of my control that made me lose the opportunity. But I think if I would have had the group to rely on, learn the skills that I've been learning, I would have made better decisions and would have had a different outcome. So I'm a big believer in getting together with like-minded people who know more than you, and in these type of organizations, because entrepreneurs have a really tough time in a world where most people aren't entrepreneurial.
Yes.
And to hang out with like-minded people is very important. And you asked a question earlier about like how do you have a life when you do that. Entrepreneurs, what I like about WMI and the ELP organization is they have what they call a one life philosophy, where you don't have your work life and your home life. You have one life, and you
absolutely do.
You integrate it.
Mm-hmm.
So you make sure that you do family trips sometimes with the group, or you just integrate it so that you're never pulled in two directions. It's just you try to pull it all together.
Right. That's interesting. And one of the things that you do is you actually create music for organizations, which you did for WMI, right?
Yeah, I did. And I was asked because they, like everybody, the meeting shut down. We haven't met as a group since the pandemic started, and no one has. So we've been doing a lot of Zoom meetings, and it's not the same. And they have a year every year when they make the new groups together. It's called the Choosing, and they have a nice big event in Moncton. And because that had to get canceled, they had a little extra money to try and find a way to make more meaning from it. So I was asked if I could write a song that brings out the essence of the entire organization, and to make a music video that they could show online that could inspire not just the newcomers, but the membership already, and remind everybody what we already know about what we like about that. Okay. So that's it's not a small thing to do when you have 500 people that have a slightly different opinion on what the organization means, and different styles of music that they like, and to try and take that on. But it went really well. And I find that sort of work to be very rewarding. Whereas some musicians would say writing a corporate song is selling out. I don't see that at all, because I look for the meaning. And I know that for the WMI song, I wrote it in a way that you could listen to it, and except for that one little spot at the very end where I say WMI, it could mean anything to anybody.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the song means more to the people in the organization. So anybody can like it, but it means a lot to the people from WMI. And I really like writing songs that mean something to an audience, whether it's a small audience or a big audience.
Right. Well, we can share a little clip from that
Great.
as well for.
When you're afraid as you navigate the change that always comes, and come it must. When you're alone in the midst of growing pains and you need help from friends you trust, where I have your back and you have mine, and we'll come together to build one life, and I'll come running to your battle cry, 'cause I am on your side. I am on your side. Loads get lighter if we both take hold, and we dive down deeper till we reach the goal. And it won't matter where the cold wind blows, when I need a guide, and you are by my side.
So that's just sort of clip that off, because often when you're streaming, the sound isn't as good as the YouTube, but you can always look it up. But I love that you were able to create and get into the feeling of what they wanted, as opposed to a corporate song.
Yeah, and communicating with music in this type of a way is it speaks from the heart to the heart, and you can tell people what the message is, but if they don't feel it, it doesn't matter. And so music is a way to help people feel the message and feel good about what they're doing, and yeah, it's important.
So let me ask you, I know that, there's a lot of things that have impacted in the last 3 months, but you have come through a lot over your career. But as we grow, different things weigh on us. I'm curious for you at this stage, what are the things that are most on your mind as you are moving forward with your business? Perhaps the things that keep you up at night at times.
Well, it's definitely an uncertain time. Like somebody asked if I had availability in September, and it's like, yeah, I've got a lot of availability in September. But I'm hoping that will change. And with that call, it did change a little bit. But so I need to find ways to do what I do and whatever the new normal is going to be. So I'm concerned with how I will roll that out. But like for 30 years, as I said, I always seem to land on my feet, and I've got some creative things and fires and different irons and different fires. And so I'm exploring those. And so I'm optimistic. I'm more concerned with the high level stuff, like where are we going as a society? How are we treating each other? The song that I'm going to be releasing, so I've been busy trying to write new music, and I have a new video coming out for myself on the 22nd, and it's called "When the World Stops Turning," or "When the World Stops Ending," rather. And it asks the question, what will we be like when we emerge? Will we love better than we did before, or will we go back to what we used to be? And I'm concerned that after all the sacrifices and all the lessons we're learning about ourselves, that we'll revert back to less than optimum selves. And then there's the whole social unrest stuff that's going now too. So I'm concerned with how that's going to play out in the uncertainty, and will we lift up and bring everybody up with us that needs to get along together, or will it create a division and make us more divided than we already are? And my talks are always about how we're connected, how we need to support each other and see ourselves in others and be compassionate. and love yourself first, so that you can look at and see an individual and everybody you come across. And if you love yourself, then you should be able to find yourself in them as well. And that's the way forward for me. But when you watch too much news, I think you...
yeah, that can be...
yeah.
That's interesting. I find it, what I'm hearing in you is that you've built enough of an assurance in yourself that you may not know the path, but you know for the business, you will find a way through, so that you are now looking at these other, you're focused more on these broader issues.
Yeah, and so I have a small focus group for when this new song comes out, and it's been universally enjoyed by people of different ages and
beautiful,
races, that sort of thing. And I think that there are people that we're not hearing from a lot that are hungry for that same sort of message. They're ready and they're poised to jump in and say, yes, I will love people better than before. How do we do it? Mm-hmm. And I want to be in those conversations and hang out with those people that are having those conversations. And if I stick with them, I'll be better off. And I think it's the only way forward. So for me as a speaker or a communicator of any kind, I want to try and stay focused on trying to be my best self and hanging out with people that are trying to do the same thing. And if I can do that, I think I'll be okay.
Absolutely. Maybe with the occasional Swedish breakfast, right?
Well, yes, that's what we need. We got to get back to IKEA.
Yes. So right now, a lot of entrepreneurs have had the rug pulled out from under them. A lot of business owners, and they are, and you're working with a lot of them probably through the program that you're involved with, where the way of doing business is the old way just is not possible, and maybe they can't see a new way. I'm wondering, what advice would you have for them right now in terms of finding a way forward, or finding that assurance that you have that even if you don't know the way, you're trusting yourself to find that way?
I think, well, there will be some businesses that just there is no way out for them, and I can't really think of any off the top of my head, but if person-to-person contact is the absolute only way you can do your business, you may not be able to outlast this. And that's a realization that sometimes businesses go bankrupt. It happens all the time. And it doesn't mean you're a failure. It means you're now free to come up with another good idea. Right? So you have to move on to your next one. But for the people that do have some hope, I think you just have to keep asking questions. And that was a good thing that I learned from somebody years ago. You'll get yourself out of every problem if you ask enough questions. What do I need to do? Why didn't that work? What should I do next time? Who should I talk to? Who has the answers? What's the trend in the market? What about this? Would this idea work? And there are businesses. I think one of the encouraging things when I think about compassion and compassionate design in businesses is there are companies that have had to stop doing what they do because those services and products aren't needed for now, but they haven't laid anybody off, or haven't quit themselves, and they said, what else can I be?
Right.
And they were. So as a musician, I guess I could have just spent the last 3 months just hanging out with my kids and waiting for it to all end. But I've been really busy with this new song, putting a lot of energy into it and the writing of it with Jamie Robinson. And we shot the video and crowdsourced video from all over the world. And I think it's going to be of service to other people who need to hear a positive message. And I don't know if it's going to get watched by a lot of people or not, but if it gets watched by the right people, they might think of me as someone they want to have at their event. And then I can start my speaking career in perhaps a new direction. So it's about, there's always one more thing you can do. And if you do it from the right perspective with the right intention behind it, good things tend to happen.
And so the first thing, though, they've got to be able to do is step out of that fear so that they can start asking those questions, right? Because you can't really ask the questions in a healthy way.
Right.
Until you are able to let go of that fear.
Yeah. And, embrace the fear for where it's valuable. I mean, it's a healthy motivator. If everyone had a constant stream of income, they wouldn't be motivated to do anything innovative, probably. And so it's only in your challenging times that you realize you may be at risk of losing everything or losing the things that matter most to you. So you have to change your ways. And that's where you can put the fear aside and say, okay, that's the reality. what's my reaction going to be now, and start taking the right steps. Because chances are you're not alone. So again, hanging out with like-minded people, find out how they're dealing with their fear and insecurities and the anxieties around that, because we all have it. And it's how you handle these things that I think changes you for the better. It's not living in a bubble as though you don't have those things.
Right.
It's okay to admit that you're afraid. And it's okay to admit that not everything's going well today.
But it's reaching out for that support and not isolating yourself.
Yeah. And I know that's been your experience in mine, and with the CAPS community. There's a lot of, we're in the same business, and CAPS is an organization that allows like-minded people, like speakers who have a peculiar way of making a living, to share their fears and anxieties, right?
Totally crazy way.
Yeah.
So Dave, how can people find you if they're looking for you?
Everything related to me, I guess, comes through the website. So DaveCarrollmusic.com, DaveCarrollmusic.com. That's it.
Wonderful.
And I'm on Facebook and the other social media platforms as well. But
and watch out for the new song on the 22nd. It's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
I'm stoked about it.
Yeah. And folks, I'm going to be back again every weekday from in June, talking about with an incredible entrepreneur. Tomorrow, I am going to be speaking with Shirley King from the UK, who is building a business to support women who are pregnant, all the challenges that they go through in terms of moving from career into that, juggling those and working through all the concerns through their pregnancy because of her own experience and what she learned and developed in doing that. Also, for those of you who are in a leadership position, business owners, on June 24th, we have just launched a brand new online event called Leadership RX. And what this is about is, how do you lead your way? How do you support your team through this crazy wackadoodle world that we have now? That's just where maybe they're working from home, maybe some are coming in, and the rules are changing every day. So if you would like to find out more about that, just click into leadershiprx.com, and June 24th from noon to 3 p.m. Eastern time. We've got 3 amazing speakers, Michelle Cederberg, Tyler Hayden, Michelle Ray, and then I'm going to be talking about all the ideas that you've come through, distilling them down, having you distill them down, move them to action, and figure out how you can actually make the shift for you. So we'd love to have you join us. Head over to that site. You'll get all of the information. Dave, thank you again so much. Truly, truly appreciate it.
Thanks, Ravi. And I'd like to maybe, if I could, just point out one thing. That I'm looking at this button on the shirt. It's too high, right? I got it there.
Too low.
I want to start a movement. It's not enough to start a business, but a movement that they start putting buttons right there. Because I had the button down there, and I thought I looked too much like Tom Jones. That's not.
It's not unusual.
This is too much business. That's too much Tom Jones. We need something in the middle. So if anyone wants to join me in that movement, I'm all for it.
Okay. Well, you come up with a name for it, the middle button movement. And,
yes, the middle ground. It's the Buddhist button.
I love it. Well, thank you again. And we will see you guys. Thank you for tuning in. And we will see you tomorrow. Same bat time, same bat channel. Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan.